Hello guys, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 7, Dual POV with Genesis Duran. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Inked Podcast. Today we are diving into POVs, or point of views, talking about the difference between multi-POV and single POV. Now, next week we'll dive more into single POV, but this week we are talking about multi-POVs. And here to help me talk about this is my dear friend and coworker, Miss Genesis Duran. So how are you doing today, Genesis?
I'm doing good today. I did wake up early, so I feel a little bit tired, but we had a good warm up today, so I think I'm good to go today.
I think we'll be just fine. I think, despite the fact that we are both a little exhausted because we are recording earlier than we normally do, we will be just fine. Now, Genesis has joined the podcast quite a few times as she hosts for me on occasion, and she returns as a reoccurring guest quite often on the show. And I'm very excited to have her back in today. But since she already knows the groove of things and kind of knows how things go, are you ready to just dive into our questions, Genesis?
Yes, I am.
All right, then we will jump in with our very first question. Our first question today, since, like I said before, these POVs are a little bit of a new thing for us, how would you personally describe like what multi or dual POV is?
So, dual POV or multiple POV is POV that stands for point of view, and this is when you have multiple characters in your story narrating. So it's not at the same time, but it's at different times, and you have multiple characters narrating your book, and that can vary from book to book. Most stories I see are in for one person point of view, but you can have multiple, and yeah, that's what that's how I would describe dual point of view or multiple point
Yeah,
of view.
yeah, that makes sense. Um, Having dual or multi POV is basically like having, like Genesis was talking about, multiple narrators or multiple characters telling the story. And you can write dual POV in any POV. Like, okay, see, this is talking about the amount of POVs you have, but at this point in the podcast, I think we've loosely talked about first, second, and third person um, in that, and you can write dual or multi POV as however you would like to say it in all like three of those. So yeah, that was a great explanation of what dual POV or multi POV is. Now,
Thank you.
moving on to our next question, which is, since having multiple POVs can get very overwhelming, how do you like decide, or how many do you suggest having like in one story?
So I think it just depends on the book, but I would say about three point of views, because I think having more than that can be very confusing for the reader.
Mm-hmm.
You have to really think about how your reader is reading through this story, because you have to really put yourself in the reader's shoes to see how the story is playing out. Now, multiple point of views may not be necessary for your book. Like I said before, a lot of stories are usually in for one point of view, but you can have two point of views to say two different narratives. Like, you have to remember these are two different characters and they see things very differently. Or if you have three characters, it's everyone has their thought process and it's very different for them.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to really pick and choose. um, you can go through scenes and see whose point of view would be better. Like, obviously you don't want to have um, you want to have the character that you think is going to be more beneficial for your reader to see
Mm-hmm.
in that scene, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Because I would say personally, when it comes to the number of POVs in one story, I would say don't do any more than five, because any more than five just gets to be like, five is a lot on its own, but like five, you can make it a little manageable, and like you can have each voice be a little different. But like more than that, it gets really confusing. I will say personally, I'm writing a series, and one of the things about that series is the original book that I'm basing it off of. It was the first book I ever wrote. Had almost, I think it was like 10 POVs. And I was like, this is way too many. I was clearly a first time writer. And so I ended up deciding to make an individual book for like each of those characters and each of their POVs. Thus, we have four books with dual POV, which means that it's two characters swapping back and forth like per chapter or like every other chapter, etc. And then the final book is only five. There's only five POVs, so I focus on like my main five characters. So,
And that's actually a good idea though, because like I've seen the one book that I have seen, that a book series, a famous book series, it's called Divergent. And so there's three books that are all, I think they're all from the point of view of the girl. And then the fourth book is actually the point of view from someone else.
mm-hmm,
And it just recaps everything. And it's the basically the whole first book, but it's from someone else's point of view.
mm-hmm,
So I think that's very interesting to see, like someone taking an entire book to actually do the point of view. And I've seen different ones where it's like it's one book, but on one side it's one person's point of view, and then when you finish that side, you flip it over, and then it has someone else's point of view
mm-hmm.
entirely.
I've seen those before too. Those are really interesting to me because they almost stress me out a little bit just because like the whole flipping thing stresses me out. But yes, no, that makes like total sense and I completely agree with that. Now we are going to go ahead and move into our next question, which I have a couple questions in here that Genesis was not prepared for because I did not tell her about them. But
Oh dear.
they're not that hard. They're not that difficult, I promise. But then again, I always say that, and you guys are always like, that was not easy at all. Um, but my next question for today is why do you find writing dual POV almost easier than writing single POV?
Um, I like doing dual point of view better than doing one point of view because for me it helps the story move along a little bit better. So, for example, in my story, I started with the main character's point of view, but then I went to one of the side characters' point of view in the next part. It kind of helps move the story along, so I don't have my main character in every single
Mm-hmm.
scene because it's kind of difficult to write like specifically my story. It's kind of difficult to have it just be one person's point of view. I find it easier to do multiple point of view because it helps move the story along, and it also helps add to the tension a bit.
Mm-hmm.
It also helps to get the plot points um, out there for the readers. But you also don't give enough, like, I don't give enough information, I guess, of what is going on. And so adds that little bit of mystery to how the story is going to turn out, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense because when you're writing in dual POV, you get to kind of switch up perspectives a lot of the time. So like if you have two different gendered characters, like if you have a guy and a girl, you can kind of swap back and forth and see how they're viewing the same situation. Or if you have like your hero and your villain, you can swap back and forth between okay, you're seeing it from the hero's point of view or you're seeing it from the villain's point of view or like even your quirky side characters, you can see it like okay, here's the main character and here's the side character type thing. So that just makes the story a lot more dynamic, I feel like. It gives you a lot more to work with.
It does. It does because you have characters. They're not all the same, so they can be very different or they can be kind of
Mm-hmm.
similar. You can have a very prideful character, and then you can have a different point of view of a humble person. You can have like a mystery book, and you can have two very different people, and so you want to portray the way that they think in those point of
Mm-hmm.
views. And so what will happen in the story will be very affected by the way that these people see it. And I remember seeing there was a book. It was about, I think, a murder or something. And so the first point of view, it was one of those flip books where it's like one side is one person and then the other side of the book is someone else's. And in this book, I think it was like the first point of view that you read is the
Mm-hmm.
victim. Oh no, it's like the murder, I think. And then when you flip it over, that's when you read from like the victim or something. So that's gonna affect how the story came out. And I think people were saying like, oh, that the person that killed this person was lying and stuff. But you didn't know that because in the first point of view that it sounded like it was the truth.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that was very cool. So we have had a lot of great insight for this episode. We have talked about having dual POVs, kind of how we do them, what works best with them, about like how many characters we suggest having for a book with multiple POVs, and all of that. So I am very glad that you came on today, Miss Genesis. We are out of time, and that will be all that we have for today. So thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate you doing it.
Yes, of course. I can't wait to
I
come back
know, you get
again.
to come back several times. And as always, thank you to our guests for being here, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys.